Thanks for doing this on such sort of kind of impromptu basis, you know.
Totally. I was excited that you reached out because when I said, like, a philosopher should interview a psychologist, I was joking. You took it seriously.
No, very seriously. And you know, I also I've never met Paul Bloom. He's the only other psychologist that I have kind of like friends with on Substack.
Yes, I also have never met Paul Bloom, but I have read his Substack, and he is a famous psychologist. So I consider him to be sort of my ilk.
Got it, got it. One thing I'm kind of curious to ask you about this. Just um, so you know, I have a mind. I occasionally read psychologists, but I feel like I don't really have much of a feel at all for the field. And you were suggesting to me that um, well, maybe you don't identify 100% wholeheartedly with the field of psychology. So, you know, I'm also just interested in hearing your thoughts on your research, regardless of classification. But I'm kind of curious to know your thoughts on the field too, if it's something you're up to talk about.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it's sort of a multifaceted one, and I'm actually curious to ask you the same thing about philosophy, right? You could probably tell me about the continental and the analytic and all the different strains. Like, so my psychology department is pretty representative. We have 5 areas. So we have our behavioral neuroscience area, which used to be called cognitive science, and then people started doing brain stuff.
Hmm.
We have our social area, which is all about intergroup relations and sort of like theories of cooperation. And, that's where all the work on, for example, racism might go. We have developmental psych, right, which is about like how children achieve awareness and reach certain milestones. We have quant, which is where all the really smart people sit. That's like all the mathy stuff, and they're the ones that we're constantly knocking on their doors to help us figure out how to do a multi-level model. And then we have clinical psych, which is my area. And we're the ones that, sort of learn about psychopathology and how to intervene, theories of intervention, and assessment. And so, like, the flavor of psychology is super different depending on the area, so I'm partial to the clinical folks because I think our knowledge is the most applied.
Right.
I'm frequently annoyed with the social psych people. Hopefully none of them are watching. But, yeah, the field has been in a little bit of turmoil. I'm sure you're aware of the replication crisis, right, in, like, the mid-2010s. There was sort of a shocker paper that came out that found that many of the foundational findings did not sustain scrutiny. And that's really no surprise if you go back and look at those old studies. This is one of the reasons I laugh when people say the entry of women into academia has made it less meritorious because those studies are so laughable that, like people are looking at like 4 people or writing a case study and making a really grand conjecture. Like the Stanford prison experiment was done using methods that, like whole IRBs were created to get rid of because it was so unethical. And like a lot of those findings just didn't hold up when you actually had representative samples and you recruited a lot more people. And so, it sort of sent people into a tizzy. And I think actually what's happened in the decades since has been really good for the field, which has been sort of a reckoning and an understanding that, for example, if you collect a whole lot of data and you look at every possible correlation and your threshold for significance is p equals 0.05, right? Which is to say, like, there's a 5% chance that you'll unveil something. You're capitalizing on chance. You do 20 correlations, you're guaranteed to find a significant result, right? So you can sort of play with your data to find something publishable. But, someone who does an adversarial collaboration and tries to replicate your study is going to come up short. And that's really bad for the field.
Right.
And the incentive, I feel like I'm telling you way more than you want to know. But
No, 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 no. I'm 100% in.
okay, good. The incentives of the field are really bad, as they probably are in your field as well, in the sense that to publish, you want surprising and interesting results, and maybe less so in philosophy. But to get grants, you sort of need to discover things and have your name on theories. And that's super bad for actually doing replicable research, right? So a lot of good things have happened, such as pre-registering hypotheses before you collect or test with your data. which essentially means that you're like writing down exactly what you plan to do and what you expect to find and putting it in a public place so that if you then go and play with your data set and come up with a lot of specious stuff, people can call you on it. Um, Posting preprints, right? So, like before you've undergone the review process, so people can see how a project has evolved. Publicly sharing data. So, now a lot of journals actually require you to upload your data set when you submit. And the idea is anyone can then dig into that data and find out if you're doing shady stuff. Um,
Can I ask, where do people submit their preprints? That is, for people that not in academia, like the preprint is like it's before it gets printed in the journal.
Right, right. So there's an OSF, so it's the Open Science Foundation registry. So you can go to osf.io and you can actually search tons of papers. Like you can find some of my preprints, and people will upload early drafts of things. And honestly, okay, this is about to get spicy. I think we should get rid of sort of like academic publishing altogether. It's a total racket. It costs universities thousands upon thousands of dollars to pay for these for-profit publishers. And we now live in the age of the internet where, you used to have the printing press and that, put a cap on how easily you could disseminate information, but anybody can pop something online. So, we could use like a Substack of academia that would be like an OSF registry where, it's easy to see how this could go poorly if you can upvote and downvote work that's relevant and interesting. That probably creates its own bad incentives. But I think the peer review process is horrendously slow and pretty broken. Like you can tell me if it's like this in philosophy, but peer reviewers don't get paid. It's sort of thankless work.
Mhm.
You have to spend a lot of time on a paper, and the quality. So if you have an axe to grind, you will probably be more likely to review that paper, and then the author has to deal with you. So,
Yes,
like the famous reviewer too, who can like kill a paper that's really promising and is the reason that it takes 2 years to publish a lot of findings.
2 years. That's from like time of first submission. I'm guessing you
Yeah,
get
and
some
I don't
rejections.
think that's typical, but that's like a boundary case of what can happen. And so it's like, I've done some pandemic research and it's sort of annoying if you're collecting the data in 2020 and it doesn't come out till 2023, right?
Just in time.
Like our stuff on masking. Yeah,
Yeah, totally.
exactly.
Yeah, that to me is a huge part of the appeal of Substack. So in philosophy, obviously, there's not the same, in general, data concerns.
Mm,
And there's a kind of difference between what the papers are doing. I was reading
yeah,
your really nice posts about like the paper in a day. Um, but as you say, like when you write a psychology paper, it's like you've done all this preparation in advance of gathering the data, doing experiments, and so on. Whereas in philosophy, there are thought experiments, but those are quite different in nature. There was a great article one time in like the kind of philosophy version of The Onion. I don't think it's around anymore, but it was Saul, huge scandal as Saul Kripke caught plagiarized. No, excuse me, caught faking the results of a thought experiment.
like he made up thoughts.
Yeah, it's not even really clear what it would be. But,
Right, you don't
um,
really have the replication crisis at the same scale, right? Because
that's right.
you're interrogating the contents of somebody's mind, which, a foolish consistency is a poor hobgoblin.
Oh,
I just murdered that quote, but you know what I mean.
yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure. I don't think Emerson of all people would insist on fidelity to the original.
Right.
But no, I think it's quite slow in philosophy too. And we have an archive called Phil Papers
Mm.
that is freakishly good.
No.
It's really good. And the more mathy people use the archive, with
Yeah, totally.
right.
Yeah, with
And
X.
the one thing I worry about is that like I do think that having anonymous peer review is really good,
Mm.
rather than having no anonymity for kind of the reasons you point out. There's access to grind. People are going to have a lot of clout that they want to chase and juice. But I don't really know exactly how to do the archive model with peer reviewing.
Right.
Or sorry, with
Yeah.
anonymous reviewing, I mean.
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Because you do need people that will be impartial to your paper and aren't looking to just make friends, right? But I think as it is now, with peer review being such a burdensome and thankless task, the people who are willing to do the reviewing are not representative of scientific opinion.
Hmm.
So, I don't know if that like, I've thought about models where you just pay reviewers, which I think journals could do. Journals have racked up record level profits in the last few years.
Hmm.
So I think there's probably an economic model where you could do it. You could also just make journals completely nonprofit. So, like start a journal that is only online. And I think some people have tried to do this. Um, and I think SIP, which is the Science Society for Replicable Psychology or something like that, has a journal and, make it free for anybody to read and then maybe fundraise to pay reviewers. Like, maybe
Right.
that's not great either. Or, tie it to standards for promotion in academic departments more clearly. Like, right now, there aren't really good mechanisms for even tracking who's doing the most reviewing. Like, I realized as a junior professor, I was reviewing 3 papers a month, and I felt like a chump when I found out that my senior colleagues were reviewing, like, 1 paper a year.
Yeah.
Um and so there's no transparency around reviewing. So there are some websites that have sprung up to kind of keep track of who's reviewing. I think one is called Publons, and I think that's helpful, but it's not quite this. Like the only accountability is when you tell it that you've done a review. So there's no real way to mark that.
So can I transition to asking you about Substack? Because I think we
Oh,
kind of both got started on Substack around the same
me
time.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. And there's a very different like loop of, coming up with the idea, putting it out, getting the feedback, going back. And there's also like in some ways a quite different audience. So can I just ask you, how do you feel about your experience on Substack so far? Has it been rewarding? Has it made you like rethink the benefits, burdens of academic writing? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think, like, I am realizing that I must have been really frustrated with the slow pace of academic publishing. Because once I got on Substack, I was like, "I'm uncorked. All I wanna do is disseminate my thoughts. I have so many of them, and I just want people to listen to them." And I think a lot of frustrated academics feel that way. But, in my case, I joined, because I had a book that was sort of in the pipeline of getting published, and I had just submitted my book manuscript, in February of this past year, I guess of this year, and, I had that weird postpartum depression when you've been thinking about something nonstop and suddenly you hand it off to your publisher and you can't, like, touch it anymore,
Yeah,
and so I had this, like, chunk of my brain that needed to do a similar kind of thinking, and Substack just became the outlet for it. Plus, I sort of thought, like, I should start building a platform of some kind, and I suck at vertical video. This is, like,
yeah.
my first ever vertical video experience.
Hey,
I don't know, it's not so bad, but I didn't really wanna do it, on TikTok or Instagram, and, LinkedIn seemed creepy, and I just thought, like, Substack seems legit. And I had this graveyard of unpublished op-eds that, I had pitched, and never gotten any uptake on, so I was like, "I'm just gonna churn these out," and it's kind of become now, like and you've had this experience too, like a really interesting community. Like, I
right.
thought I was just gonna, like, publish my stuff into the void and people would read it, but I actually find the most enjoyable part of it is reading other stuff and then getting to interact directly with the writers, which is an unusual experience given that we're usually taking in writing with no opportunity to argue or praise the person who's written it.
Totally.
That part
Like,
really for you, I think.
yeah, I mean, I just saw Derek Thompson like talking about your work just the other day. Uh,
I
that's not
love
something
that
that
guy.
yeah, you don't get that from the academic journals very often.
Not in the slightest. Not from reviewer 2, that's for sure.
Can I ask you what have you noticed about like the pieces that people respond to, or that you found kind of rewarding? Has it been any surprises, or is it all kind of yeah? They go for the ones I knew would be bangers.
Yeah. I mean, they're all bangers as yours are as well. And I wanna ask you the same question too, but, Yeah, it's interesting. It's not always totally predictable, but I do think the incentives on Substack are interesting and unusual, which is that like the way to sort of feed the algorithm is to engage in conversation. So the piece that has gotten way more clicks than anything I've posted on Substack is "Are we mad at feminism or are we mad at capitalism?" Which was a response to I think it would like it turned into this like series of people doing back and forth with each other. But I think initially I was responding to something Elena Bridgers had
Yes.
written that she got a lot of flack for. And then there was discourse around, and then, Cartoons Hate Her picked up my thing and Elena's thing, and lots of people wrote response pieces, and it was like this whole cascade. And so I think that actually fueled people's interest. So I think the lesson is maybe like in much the same way that response videos are a whole YouTube genre,
Right.
responding to people's work and engaging with it thoughtfully seems to elicit interest because there's a sense that there's a larger discourse unfolding. I don't have the bandwidth to write a response piece every week, but like Lyman Stone's responded to a lot of my stuff, and then usually I respond back, and that's always kind of fun.
Yeah. Drunk Wisconsin says that your number one piece should have been the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire story. I love that piece.
Oh, thanks. That was actually my favorite one to write because it was so silly.
Yeah, I mean, you would never get to, you know, at the end of a journal article, while we're here, let me just like I've been kind of surprised by the variety of stuff that you can put out on Substack without people abandoning you.
Yeah, totally.
I have
No,
a
wait, please don't subscribe. Every time I post something new, I get a few. Oh, there's my husband.
hey.
You want to see me on Substack Live? Oh, he's on the phone with Turbo. Oh no, TurboTax. That doesn't sound good at all.
No,
Um,
pour one
yeah,
out for your husband.
huh?
I'm gonna pour one out for your husband.
I know. I'm really glad he's doing that so I can do this. See, it's division of labor.
Bishop Blake.
Um, it's working. Wait, we were talking about
The Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and how you can kind of right. You were saying like whenever you post something, maybe you're worried that like this is going to be the one that chases them away, or
totally. I'm always terrified. And it's funny, every time I post something, I get like 3 unsubscribes,
Mm.
like pretty quickly. And it's like, oh, this one must have really antagonized them. But then, and then I post like a spicy mad note and get like lots more subscriptions. So it's like a little bit of a pendulum. But the millionaire one I wrote the week after the feminism piece because I was like, I cannot engage in the feminism discourse anymore. So, like, what would feel like a palate cleanser?
That's awesome. And I there's something kind of liberating once you realize like it's okay if a few people don't like this one. The in the long run, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Um, I I
What has been your like either most favorite post or post that has attracted the most interest, and have you been surprised as well by what people tend to like?
I've definitely been surprised. I think the one that I was most uncertain about was the Jordan Peterson post. I had to like go and ask multiple people in real life, like, "What do you think about this? Is this okay?" And I think that one, certainly per hour spent writing it, was by far the most successful.
Yeah.
Um, but I actually did try to read Jordan Peterson's books, and
Oh man, you really sacrificed.
it was a present from a family member. And what's funny is that I don't think she liked the book, but she's like, "Well, he's a philosopher apparently, so like he must like this terrible stuff." Oh, thank you, Meg. Um, yeah, so once that one went well, I was like, okay, don't overthink this.
Yeah,
Let the people decide.
you're unleashed.
I'm unleashed.
Yeah.
Um, I also,
Wait.
oh, sorry, please go ahead.
Mm,
Oh, sorry,
uh,
I was interrupting you. I was going to say, I also was like, I've kind of gotten into a little groove of writing more substantive pieces. Like I look back at my old posts and the paragraphs are all super short and I'm
yeah.
telling a lot of like jokes. And I feel like I was super afraid of people clicking away every sentence.
Yeah.
And I noticed that some people, like including people that are in the chat right now, and you, who had like successful posts with like longer paragraphs, like taking time setting stuff up, being really substantive. I thought, well, let me just try doing that. And I tried doing this with this piece on like Sefer Teach Out and oligarchy.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, I was surprised that that one was received pretty well. I got some, some angry comments, but it's nice when people engage.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying, yeah, like I've been really enjoying that you can kind of mix up the style and see what works in real time rather than, throwing a message in a bottle, sending it to a journal, and then 10 years later, maybe someone emails you saying, I opened the paper by mistake and I like the intro.
Oh my god. Yeah, like, that's the thing about academic publishing is it spends you take 2 years to get something out, and you put so many hours into it, and then you maybe will have 3 people read it or, maybe, somebody will pull up the abstract or ChatGPT will feed it to them. And I agree, like, Substack, the amount of feedback you can get immediately is pretty compelling. And, I hope that that doesn't just mean that all academics are only gonna become Substackers from now on,
Yes.
because it's a potent brew.
You kind of have to, yeah, I totally agree. It's I don't want to say it's junk food because it's not junk food, but it's like I think it's worth it to spend some time in the trenches of, really trying to convince your peers that you have something to add to this long conversation and that you've really read everything else on the conversation. But MJR Schneider says, working his way towards or her way towards finishing the first post for 4 months now. Let me say, MJR, when you finish it, DM me. I'll read it.
Yep. I think, like, that's the other thing about writing on Substack. I think it's good exposure therapy. Like, I as a clinical psychologist, I always talk about exposure therapy as, like, that's sort of the coin of the realm when reducing anxiety, right? Like, you find the thing that makes you nervous and you approach it rather than avoid it, and you learn to tolerate it. And I do think, like, having to and it's been good for me who's got a lot of anxiety about a book coming out to just, like, throw a lot of writing into the ether. And, it's hard to know, like, who's actually reading it and what they actually think, and, um, there might be tons of people that hate it and don't write nice comments, but it's nice when you do get positive feedback, and, and it just helps you learn to build tolerance for that sort of performance anxiety of writing. So, one thing I have tried to do on Substack is just, like, force myself to post some stuff. I
Mm.
do better when I have structure, and I feel like otherwise I'd be really loosey-goosey and skip weeks or post 3 things in a week, and it's better for my brain if I just sort of, like, treat it like there's a deadline. And if what I write maybe isn't good or is a little half-baked or isn't edited, I still will try to post it just to kinda keep good.
You got to keep the reps up. That's okay. MJR says, I'll send it to you when it's done in 5 years. It says, as long as you send me another one 5 years after that,
That's right.
then it's all good. Um, can I ask you about clinical psychology? I
Huh?
So you said that's your home out of the kind of subfields in psychology. How do you feel like the field is doing these days? Do you think that morale is up? Do you think that there's a particular like exciting trend or thing going on? Like I, as somebody that doesn't know what's, I mean, I know the words clinical and psychology, but how would you say the state of the field is?
Yeah, those are 2 good words. I mean, honestly, morale, and this might be true for you as well, is kinda terrible throughout academia. So, I think there's sort of the question of our current, you know, socio-political situation, and then maybe the larger question of clinical psychology as a field.
Yes.
These are tough times in, like, I would consider clinical psych to be part of the biomedical sciences. Um, I don't know. Psychology likes to think that it's a science. I like to joke that it's a pseudoscience, but I mean, we are using empirical data and, we're developing intervention, right? So, those are the areas that have been sort of slashed in terms of their research funding the most. So I don't know if you heard about like the National Science Foundation. There was a list of banned words that if you include them in research grants, your funding proposal will be rejected. And the words included such controversial words as women and um, diversity, which,
Yeah.
like, if you're writing about the diversity of a colony of microbes, is actually pretty bad for your science project. So just a ton of people, including a couple amazing trainees in my lab, had their funding cut just really precipitously, frequently while they're halfway through a project, already gotten the money to collect data, hire staff. The funding gets pulled, and you never even get to write up the results, which is just counterproductive. So people are really bummed about that, obviously, and a lot of universities, and I don't know how graduate funding works for you in philosophy, but like we fund our graduate students fully, and when universities are belt tightening, it also shrinks the size of our pool of students we can train. And we're in a field where I think there's high need for mental health, qualified people in mental health, and so that hasn't been good for us either. My husband is coming through with the TurboTax on the phone.
Yes. Also, very cute dog, I must say.
Oh yeah. Here, wait. Can I?
Oh, of
Do you
course.
want? Oh, I'm so bad at using my phone, but if
It's okay.
in the view, you can see him. He's like a super annoying dog, actually.
I see him. No, this is good exposure therapy for you in vertical video.
I know that's
Um,
good. I feel like I'm getting used to it just as we're talking.
um, can I follow up on this thing about the political environment? So yeah, like I,
Oh,
I really I
yeah.
really liked I loved your posts about the compact, for example, or the notes and so on. I think there are legitimate concerns about academia, and I think the public does have a right to kind of have a justification from universities for why we're. Oh my god, the dog is so cute.
Hey, dude, I'm doing a Substack live.
Sorry. I'm gonna send some likes for the dog though.
You're kind of killing my vibe. Okay, but look, now you can see the dog better, so at least he did that.
I think it's a crowd pleaser on
Okay.
net. Um, but yeah, I was gonna say so like
For the dog, stay for the dog, and the
that
yelling at the husband.
it's just the law of content. We're not here to argue with it. But so I do think that there's like a legitimate, like you should be able to justify what you're doing with public money and telling the public like
Yeah, yeah,
go away,
yeah,
loser, you don't know. That's not okay.
yeah,
But
yeah.
what would you say to people that are asking for a justification for why we should fund universities?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. People could read my posts. But I would say, like, the frustrating thing to me with all the recent developments is that universities genuinely are in need of reform. Like, our funding system could be more efficient, and it could be deployed more effectively, and we could improve grant review, and we could improve incentives for publication and funding, and we could improve transparency and cost effectiveness of universities. Like, all of those things would be good. And a sincere bipartisan effort to do them, I think, would be welcome. What's frustrating is when it seems like funding's getting cut precipitously without regard to merit, for purely politicized partisan reasons. And universities are being defunded sort of on the basis of grievance and inflected threats, right? Like being mad at Columbia for student protests, so you're going to shut down all their medical schools research. The medical school isn't even on the same campus as where the protest took place, right? So you just pulled the plug on a bunch of Alzheimer's and cancer research, 68 blocks away from where the protests happened. So when the attacks are in such bad faith, I think it ends up actually sending people farther into their bunkers to sort of like hunker down and like double down on the sort of flawed stuff that universities are already doing. So it ends up just, I think, being fully counterproductive. Um, but I think like greater accountability from to the public is a worthy goal to whatever extent universities are taking taxpayer funds. I would also say, like, we do have pretty good data that research funding returns benefits to the economy. So, I mean, obviously, NIH is not an unbiased narrator, but they published a study that every dollar in funding generates, I think it was like $2.39 in growth, in the form of hiring and innovation and community development. And you see that, like, when a bunch of funding was cut, like, who's the representative from Alabama? Katie Britt, I think. actually spoke out and said, like, the University of Alabama really needs this funding. Like, it's actually red states, flagship universities that hurt those economies almost more than in blue states, right? Like, Los Angeles is fine if USC and UCLA are defunded, right? But like the homes of flagship universities in many of these states are sort of the center of prosperity and job growth and the production of educated young people. So it sort of like ends up being bad for the whole country when we just like defund universities and decide that research isn't worth supporting. Like research funding is an investment in better healthcare, greater knowledge. I'm in mental health. Like we actually need to think about how to promote mental health. So I think it's meritorious, and I think the fact that there's room for improvement isn't a reason to pull the plug on it. And again, I just think a lot of the partisan attacks have been very poorly informed. Like JD Vance had a whole tweet that drove me nuts about like we should defund universities because of the replication crisis. That's why we need to cut all these NIH grants. Like, dude, NIH introduced replication and reproducibility criteria into grant review explicitly in 2018. That was during your, like, dude's friggin' presidency. Like, just know what you're talking about before you're like, "That this justifies my desire to cut the NIH."
I think we got to start cutting funding to universities because these Vietnam War protests are getting out of control. Like,
I mean, it's like, didn't we already do Kent State and, like, all this stuff? And, like, I feel like we're relitigating all the battles of the '60s because we still have boomers in power.
yeah,
And they're still mad about the same culture war stuff that it was situated at universities then. But also, like, universities are magnets for young people. So, like, of course, they're going to be mad and annoying about things and doctrinaire because
yeah.
all people in their early 20s generally are. And that doesn't mean that universities themselves are pursuing a flawed project.
Preach. That was very that was very impressive for an off the cuff answer.
What's your take on it? Like, do you I guess you haven't dealt with the compact, but you've dealt with, like, other encroachments.
Yeah, my take. So right now I'm teaching a class on community and social capital. So I've been thinking a lot about loss of social capital and trust in different organizations, and I think I've seen a fair amount of this on university campuses.
Mm,
So
mhm.
in an interview, anonymous with a former UNC student organizer, now like a you know professional and so on, uh,
Right.
talking with the so one of my students in a prior class did an interview with like a previous generation of organizer, and they were talking about some of the differences in student organization. And the older generation said we had like a kind of goal at the end of talking to the administration and bringing our demands to them. And then, we would go and have conversations with them. And they would say, well, we can't do that because it's going to cause XYZ problems. And then the students could say, no, wait a minute. We have a plan. It's not going to do that. We've got a way around this. And they would, I mean, both, it was just clearing of information and kind of building of some trust to work towards an agreement, right? But my sense is that there's so much more antipathy and mistrust
Mhm.
between student protesters and the administration that there's in general like a lack of collective action capacity in universities, particularly if you include the students, where like the students do not internalize the costs of reputation to the university
Right,
of various actions, like say disinviting a speaker.
right.
And whereas the universities, I think, have been taking a huge pummeling
Yes.
from the actions
Yeah.
of some of faculty. Like just to be clear, I think a lot of it's
Yep,
faculty, but a lot of it's also students.
yep.
Um, and I think both the case of like the young doctrinaire faculty and the younger students, there's a kind of lack of um, social capital within the university as an org that prevents us from sort of saying, well, on the one hand, I do want to press this case, but on the other hand, I got to think about I don't want to make the university look bad. Nobody gives a shit about making the university look bad.
Right, right. Whereas
So
if
yeah,
you're like, you have a corporate employer, you have a code of maybe like what you're allowed to say to damage that employer. Well, clearly the solution is we just have to get rid of all the students they're causing the problems, right? Like, let's just, you know, do our thing and have fun as faculty because they're sort of killing our reputation a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, like in all seriousness, I think that's 100% right. And I've tried to point this out. I wrote a piece about like our university's too woke, um, where I sort of said like actually the people in power at universities are quite conservative in like the small c version of the word. Like they're doing things like hiring adjuncts who they can pay less in order to hire fewer tenure line professors.
Right.
Like they are operating like a business, right? And they're not generally the ones that are like, burning flags on the campus lawn. And when I think like the sort of Fox News or X commentators of the world love to show videos of really objectionable things happening on campus, those things, like you say, are rarely perpetrated by people with institutional power. And even frequently at the faculty level, it's often the most tenuous faculty that are sort of the most implicated in these things. So they have, like, in a way, the least loyalty to the university, and for good reason. So, yeah, I think you're right. But if people maybe liked universities more, we could defend ourselves more successfully.
Yes. And I do think that like a significant amount, maybe even a decisive amount of the dislike of universities is an own goal.
Right.
Um, but at the same time, I love the way you put it was grievance. Like I think there's a lot of grievance driven. I want to destroy this, you know,
Right.
satanic mill, dark satanic mill,
Right.
um, and part of the problem that I think people haven't thought about is like the long term like equilibrium effects of this. People like Terry Tao
Yeah.
are thinking about hitting the bricks.
Right.
And I don't think a lot of Americans realize how much prosperity and goodness there is from like someone in your social circle taking classes with like these world class, amazing, like world beating people. Like I really think that universities are like a jewel for all
Yeah.
the anti hype and for all of the genuine flaws and as you said needs for reform. Like I posted a little note about this the other day. Like we got to sometimes you just got to stop and smell the roses. But look at what's actually going on day to day at this university.
Yep.
Students are going and talking about like the human mind and mental health and history and justice. And do we really want a society where like there's no shared code or no shared ethics or no shared sort of intellectual ground?
Right. Exactly. It's like the Matthew Arnold, right? The best that has been thought and said. It's like that sort of at its best what a university can offer through a true liberal arts education. Like clearly you and I have fully drunk the Kool-Aid on this because
Well,
we're both like graduates of like what is it, the 23rd grade or how many years you spend in school. But and I think people rightly feel like it's quite elitist to praise the university when it's inaccessible to so many people. But we also know that higher education is an engine of, greater income, like it does return rewards. And I think having a concerted effort that's very partisan to sort of discredit universities and higher education more generally seems not great for society.
yeah,
And like I've collaborated with researchers in Europe. I've traveled to Spain. I've met with people collecting data, and there's always been a stance of envy for the United States for having such well-resourced universities and sort of secure careers for faculty that aren't purely nepotistic. So apparently in
yeah,
Spain, if you want to get an academic job, you have to be friends with the person doing the hiring, and someone has to die, basically. And I'd like to think that our process is a little more merit driven in the States.
no,
But also, like, we really invest in our universities. We have really strong funding agencies. Like, the United States has historically been the best place to do science in the world. People come to the United States to do research. thereby benefiting our economy, right? Because then those people go to start companies or develop new products and drugs. And so also, like, we haven't even talked about the cap on international students or the sort of like vetting of international student visas, by looking at people's phone and seeing if they posted anything political. That's also really damaging to our global standing and our sort of ability, our university's ability to be an ambassador to the world. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think like universities are good.
Yeah.
And we should make them better.
Yeah.
And maybe, because they are way too expensive, we should figure out creative ways to make them more accessible to people. And, I'm also sympathetic to the argument that, like, I think we've made the mistake of telling young people that the only path to success is through university education. And I think that's a bit of a red herring. The trades are fantastic. People can be really prosperous, if they go into electrician careers or other careers that don't necessarily require 4 years. I think it's kind of crazy that, like, we require so much credentialing of preschool teachers, for example. There are many ways in which our focus on credentialing slows down the economy and, puts young people in a position of accumulating debt. But
See why Derek Thompson was restacking you.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Uh, so he's a smart guy. He knows what's up. Um, but yeah, like we need to fix our problems for sure.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't think that means you just burn it all down and you kill kind of like one of our better resources that has made us more competitive globally.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Um, and
Yeah, what's the vibe like at your university? Like, are people sort of demoralized or um, like people are always really depressed in our faculty meetings?
um, I think that the vibe, it's hard for me to say. I actually don't know what people outside of my department in particular are thinking.
Hmm.
I've actually not, I've met some people working in the more medical research side. They are feeling the the crunch. So that's
Yeah.
been really rough.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I think in psychology, I have a good friend in the psych department. Um, she's well, I think they're, you know, this question's about our admission's going to be cut just for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
We There's a funny story. Like philosophy is weirdly insulated from some of this because, like a century ago, there was this guy Horace Williams who was the chair of the department and lived a sort of frugal life, and then had all this land, and then donated the land, sort of earmarked for philosophy, to the university, and then
This is why people hate academia, by the way.
oh yeah.
Like some super rich guy created like a patronage system.
Well,
Yeah.
well, to me, this is sweet. Like he saved up money, but that's not the end of it, though. So for decades, no one in the philosophy department knew about this. Um, and one day, the chair of the department, my esteemed colleague Jeff Sarah McCord, um, he sort of noticed that there was this thing, but it was money going to physics due to a typo.
What?
Yeah, so for decades, this money had been going to physics, and
We
then
almost would have gotten it in psychology, just like a couple more ticks down the alphabet.
I mean, I get plenty of like random people thinking it's psychology, just brain farting,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah. So they got the land assessed, and then eventually the university agreed to buy it from the philosophy department, and now there's an airport named after Horace Williams, and
Oh my
that
God,
little
you have
pot
your
of
own
money.
airport? Your department has its own airport?
That's it's the universities now, but
Okay.
the money that bought the airport land is what funds our graduate students.
Wow.
So it's a charmed life.
So do you get special privileges when you go through baggage claim and like if you do you get like expedited boarding as a philosopher?
So I think that the Horace Williams Airport I've only ever seen the fence up. I think it's maybe for like, the football team or like the true VIPs.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not for the political philosophers.
Well, they should really create like a special runway just for the philosophy planes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've been waiting. Well, I wanted to ask you, did you have any
Straight to
questions
straight
about?
to like Max Planck and back or something.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you, did you have any questions about philosophy? Because this is kind of how this got started, with there being so much philosophy in your feed.
Yes, yeah, like, why are there so many philosophy bros on Substack? And also, are you offended that I called you a philosophy bro?
We prefer philosophy fellas.
Yeah, that
Uh,
is better.
no, I will say, I mean, shout out to Moral Law, Morala W. You know, within, and we've got several other uh, ph women philosophers on Substack too. Actually, I think Kate Mann has a zillion subscribers. Um, Kate's a fellow MIT grad, and what was it? Pamela Anderson is also an extremely successful philosophy Substacker, though people might not realize that's technically her genre.
Wow.
Um, yeah, no, she's like one of the very top philosophy Substackers, and I you know, I had to pay respects because she also had a hit post with the same name as my dissertation.
Which was what?
What we owe to ourselves.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so I had to subscribe to the Pamela Anderson Substack, and I couldn't get my research funds into it. But so why is there so much philosophy on Substack though? My sense is that philosophy has some like social cliques
Mm.
that don't neatly map onto the subdisciplines, like effective altruism, for example. I think there's a pretty substantial effective altruist community on Substack. I think also philosophy AI, like that intersection,
Mm, totally.
that's on Substack.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's a few of us that are sort of more straight moral. I mean, I have some interest in effective altruism. Like I published a couple of papers, but and given some talks at EA groups and stuff. But I'm much more of like I'm much more into rights than most.
For you.
And the political institutions than
Mm,
the kind of EA median. But I respect a lot of what they're doing, and I think Bentham is quite funny.
mm,
Uh,
mhm. Yeah.
Actually, here's another. Oh, go. You go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, it seems like there's quite a community. And it seems like a fun discipline to be part of.
It's ridiculously fun. Like I actually think that being a part of the philosophy community was so good for me. So I'm gonna confess something to you. That do you know like the kind of stereotype of like a freshman philosophy major?
Yes.
Yeah, that was when I was a freshman. I think I was that, but and I was the same in high school.
Or like truly looked at your hand. What if
Yeah.
what if every cell is actually like a giant's footprint? Like that.
Not just the sort of chin stroking, though there was plenty of that. There's also the sort of know-it-allness,
Yeah, sure.
um, and I I think actually like exposure to the philosophy as a discipline really changed the way I think about this. I was at UT Austin, which is a super pluralist department at the time, where there were like significant number of religious people and religious conservatives, and then there were atheists, materialists, philosophers, and and one thing that becomes really clear when debating philosophy is that you just cannot presume that people share your starting points.
Hmm.
And it's
Mm,
extremely difficult to
mm,
argue for your starting points.
right.
That's kind of what makes them starting points.
Yeah.
So I became a little bit more tolerant. And I noticed that the people I respected the most were the ones who were really good at listening and acknowledging the
Mhm.
other side's views.
Mm.
Um, so that to me was like maybe the biggest value shift in my life.
Hmm. Because you sort of figured out that, um, like, it was better to, like, listen and understand where somebody was coming from than to confidently assert your own opinions?
Yeah, exactly. And if you're confidently asserting in a way that's trying to like tear the other person down, in the long run, you're just going to kind of like miss the points that other people have, and
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to. I think I can explain this better with a story. Can I tell you a
Yeah,
story?
please.
Do you know Dave Chalmers?
No.
Okay, he's like a Australian philosopher, um, one like really big deal in consciousness studies in particular. But he's like a all around amazing philosopher. So Chalmers is like the paradigm of sort of can lay out the whole kind of debate really clearly, and you know people will debate whether it's totally impartial, but it's like clearly quite good at being like very impartial. And there's a debate that he had for like April Fool's Day, I think, with some physicalists about the mind. So
Mm.
he's defended dualism before, where it's like the mind is a separate substance or property, and um, then the physicalists think it can be reduced to brain or psychological states, so on. And th- Chalmers, so when the physicalist scientists were trying to impersonate Chalmers, it didn't sound anything like him. They were like, "Well, I just believe that you're all so silly, and of course the mind is real, and it's the best thing." And I was just like, "This is kind of a little sad." And then Chalmers stated the physicalist view better than they did. So that kind of stuff, like seeing that as a student, I can think like that's actually what you want to aim for, to be able to be super fair to your opponent.
Yes, yes. It's interesting, like, one of the first things you learn in psychology training, like clinical psychology training, right, is that the best way to establish rapport with your, client is through reflection, which is to say, um, you could tell me, like, "I've been feeling discouraged because, things haven't been going well for me lately," and I would say, "Yeah, it sounds like you're feeling really discouraged." And it's like a super easy trick, but it works really well because people feel heard. And you realize that, like, in most people's lives, they actually are rarely fully heard by another person. Like, it's actually, like, a really nice experience to feel heard and acknowledged, and that's, like, a really good tip for couples therapy too, is that
Mm,
really what you're helping people do is listen to each other better and have better conversations, and a lot of what the therapist is there to do is that reflecting process of, like, helping understand where people are coming from because we're so focused on our own defensive desire to articulate our own position and, like, stake our own claim that we forget to listen to why our partner's point exists in the first place. So it sounds actually very familiar, like, that, once you can, like, fully hear people, you can have much more productive conversations. And it's kind of the opposite, unfortunately, of how a lot of discourse works online, right? Which is where you're incentivized to have a take. And I'm guilty of this too, for sure. Like, it's much easier to have a take that like creates a straw man than it is to sincerely try to understand your opponent's perspective. Like, I really like following conservative writers and thinkers on Substack, because I genuinely wanna understand their worldview,
mm.
and I feel like, I also wanna debate my own worldview, but I can't do it if I am not able to effortfully, um, understand their intentions and goals and see those as legitimate fundamentally.
You know, I wonder if this is connected to something you said earlier. So you said earlier that like the biggest piece you had was a reply piece.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah,
I wonder if maybe that's partly just people love seeing the reflection, and also people. I think we like seeing something that we've read reflected by somebody else too.
totally. Which is that sorta, and I think that's also connected to what we were saying earlier about why we like Substack, especially after burning out on academic publishing, is, like, the feeling of being heard, and seen by other people, right? Like, it's incredibly gratifying to get engagement on something that we've worked hard to write because you often feel like you're screaming into the void.
And let me just say on that note, Jesse, Hargis, and Meg, we see you. We thank you for because of like I think that the point about reflection you made really struck a chord. It's like Jesse, I think maybe this was slightly before this said, if you haven't been accused of holding a philosophical view that you actually strongly oppose, you aren't explaining your opponent's views charitably enough. And I thought it was great. And Hard just said, I used to be more skeptical. This was like directly in response to what you said. I used to be more skeptical of reflection on the grounds that it sounded stupid to repeat things back to people. But I eventually realized you can't repeat things unless you listened.
Right, exactly, and just the feeling of being heard is enough to propel the conversation forward. And it often gets people out of their, like, we're all so focused on defending our own position that as soon as your position is fully heard and understood by someone, then you don't need to be entrenched in it anymore. You can actually move on to
Hmm.
have a better conversation that might allow you to even shift your position.
Um, I have a question related to what Meg said about, this feedback can establish whether you've been understood immediately. But I also see Jack Miller said the problem is that everybody else has horribly mistaken views, and I'm right about everything, so it's hard to take them seriously. So, well, obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, th-
Yeah.
th- personally, I always have a except for Jack Miller clause whenever I'm making these general statements about discourse. But it's always good to make that explicit. But I wanted to ask you something, Darby, which was, um, do you feel like you've been understood on Substack? Do you think people get your posts, or do you think that there've been like, that they're swiping at you in ways that don't connect with what you're trying to say?
Oh, that's such a good question, and I honestly feel like I don't really know because, I post something and then, like, the sort of most motivated people might leave a comment or respond to something, but I don't know that that's a representative sample.
Mm.
Like, I try to write, like, music recommendations, and people almost never respond to them, so I don't know if people even, like them or listen to the song, so, um,
I have
I
something on this. I think on the millionaire post you had always.
yeah, my
So
favorite.
I love always, and I hadn't listened to them for like a year, maybe 2 years, until I read that post. And it reminded me, like all these great memories flooded back. Like I used to play. I lived in this little apartment complex in Australia when I was working there for my first job, and there was like a cupola on top of the building, and my neighbors would go play guitar in the cupola, like overlooking the street. And when I got to know them, we started just playing. We would play always
Oh,
in the cupola, um, and so just like yeah, for what it's worth, I really appreciated the trip down memory lane from that reco.
see, that's incredibly gratifying. I'm actually going to speaking of Australian bands oh, no, wait, sorry, they're from New Zealand.
You're right.
I'm going to see the Beths tonight.
Oh, fun!
They're, like, a super fun New Zealand band. I think they're, like, New Zealand's maybe 3rd most popular export behind, Flight of the Conchords and maybe Courtney Barnett. No, wait, Courtney Barnett's Australian.
Yeah, she's Melbourne. That's where I used to live. She's got a song called "Depreston" about one of the Melbourne suburbs.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, well, I mean, it can't fly to the Concords can't be the most famous. I mean, aren't they like the third most successful folk parody band in New Zealand? I think that's how they used to introduce themselves.
Yeah, who's number 1? I don't know. Therapy with a question mark? I think I don't know how I'm received on Substack. Do you feel like you know how you're received on Substack and whether it's favorable or
I'll be
what?
honest, the uninterrupted adulation is a little bit much at times. But actually, related question from so first Meg says Lord. I'd forgotten about Lord. And then Jack says, I'm curious to hear how you feel when you receive overconfident comments from uninformed people correcting you on topics in your area of expertise. I I sometimes do have to take a little bit of a deep breath, but it's not if it's like one. It's if they're being like ultra aggressive or if they're being ultra persistent. That's when it gets to me.
I feel like I have that problem more with notes than on posts because with posts I've been able to much more longly,
Yeah.
um,
We're wordifying it. It's all good.
but like for example, I posted a note about you know my university. There was this horrendous day where they laid off all of the staff in the College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences, and so every staff person in my department was let go. And, it was really shocking and sad and people that were incredibly loyal and, like, some of them will get rehired. There's a process happening now, but, it was just, like, a really horrible thing to do to all these very loyal employees. And I posted a note about it and got initially and I think this is an interesting insight into, like, the algorithm, like, really sympathetic, kind comments for, like, the first hour, and then something tipped where, like, all of a sudden, I think it got seen by everyone that hates universities and doesn't think they should exist. And I just got, like, the most, like, "Good, let them starve. I'm glad jobs." It's like, dude, this was, like, the person that makes our coffee and, like, our department secretary who's, like, brings cookies to the department for the students, like, what world are we living in that these people should be, like, thrown out for their wokeness?
Yeah.
So, um, and sometimes those
Woke by association, Darby. They're, you know.
none of them firebrands. They're like really hardworking people that if they worked in any other setting wouldn't have their it's pulled from them so precipitously.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, but in that case, like I ended up writing a whole length post about it because I was sort of like so surprised by that reaction. So sometimes it does, like when people engage with you in really bad faith ways, it actually probably makes you stronger. Like, what does not kill me makes me stronger, to quote a philosopher. Like, because then you have to actually think about what you're saying and try to defend it. So,
Yes.
yes, and I find a lot of comments to be also just like amusing because I don't.
Yes.
You're just like
Lyman Stone on the virtues of being a dick to everybody, I found pretty amusing.
I actually thought and he's like written like 3 takedowns of stuff I've posted and I have to say, like, I like the guy because, his "Why I Am So Mean" post I thought was hilarious. And
It's like no notes. And I'm not even just being mean about it. Like I really think it's great that someone actually believes something and states it with real arguments. And even if many people will read it and not go all the way with him, it's like, yeah, I'm glad you actually made me think this through way better than I would have otherwise.
yeah, yeah, it's like it's not necessarily my style, and I also think, like, as a woman, there's, like, maybe less of, like, a range of acceptable, like, stances to take in arguments, and if you get extra mean on people, then like you're an evil witch, like Hillary Clinton or something. Um, but like I think, he's like a generally like smart and sort of like data-based person, even if I disagree with pretty much all of his stances. And so those kinds of interactions are really interesting. It's more frustrating when people just attack but don't,
Yes.
you know, fully you know, rigorously, think through the problem they're talking about.
This is, I feel like, the main thing that I wanted to kind of import to the discourse from epistemology. I mean, it's really important if you want to. If you're the only source of information on something, you want to be reliable.
Yeah.
And it sort of doesn't matter where you get your information from, as long as all things considered, you're reliable. You could just be like parroting the encyclopedia. Still great. But on the other hand, if you're just a part of someone's information diet, then it's really important not to be a parrot because then people will think, oh my gosh, there's this whole chorus of experts but actually it's really just one expert getting echoed over and over again. Maybe not even an expert, but you see what I mean? So like, I think it's so valuable to have someone like Lyman or Richard Hanania. I think is quite interesting in this role. I think Iglesias, much more so than people give him credit for, like
Yeah.
really tries to be independent and emphasizes disagreements. Um, and yeah, so I mean, it's not just like where you are ideologically, but like how how much are you just saying this because other people are saying it?
Right.
Like if you get a high score in dependence like that, then I'm not going to get that much out of following you in addition to the
Right.
people that you sound like.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's refreshing when people have a strong stance, even and frequently a contrarian one, and defend it with some rigor and,
Yes.
like attention to empirical evidence.
Okay. You should feel free to say no because this could be me putting you in the hot seat. But do you have any contrarian stances in your field or either related to Substack? Anything that comes to mind?
I mean, yeah. Um Oh, man. So, yeah, like, I do think, like, in some ways I have more like, I consider myself to be a pretty dyed-in-the-wool leftist, but in many ways I have fairly traditional and conservative views, like, at least within my own personal life. Like, I actually think marriage is great, I really like it. I think it's good for kids. I think it's really important for kids to, have parents with bandwidth and, like I don't know. I'm not wading into any daycare debates. Actually, that's like the most hot button topic. I think my most controversial topic is probably that I think like legal weed is kind of bad. Um,
Mm.
uh, but I think there are a lot of caveats that you need to put on, like, you don't necessarily think we want to just make it like a crime that you go to jail for. What about you? What's your most like contrarian stance that would get you canceled on
I mean,
Substack?
I will say with legal weed, I'm much more worried about it than other people are. And again, it's not because I believe in um, criminalizing, uh, but I mean, one, I think the the myth that there were like hundreds of thousands of people in prison for nonviolent marijuana related offenses is just it just won't die. Like the number was order of magnitude less than that, or roughly 40,000. Um, but second, like there's a pretty serious risk that regular use will cause schizophrenia. Like, I think schizophrenia is extremely so my mom's a neurologist,
Oh yeah, there you go.
and it's, like, extremely difficult to manage because the drugs have awful side effects, and, people will understandably be reluctant to give themselves awful side effects, but then their judgment gets impaired, and then on goes this quite negative cycle. So I think, like, people should be cognizant of the long-term risks of regular marijuana use if you're young. Um, but I don't think that means that we should be throwing people in the gulags for smoking pot, in college. Otherwise, there'd be no one in college and everybody in the gulags. So, I mean, overstating here, but then after so heterodox views. Let me tell you one. I also have I also do think that like I agree with a lot of what you said about marriage and kids. I think maybe the most heterodox view I have is that I'm way more like we need to conserve valuable institutions and we should be very careful about fashioning ourselves as social engineers. Like I'm way more compelled by like Edmund Burke style careful what you break political philosophy than a lot of other people. And I have to say it's not just left or right. Like I think, Marx in some ways is just a sort of he's there's a science of human history, and we need to rearrange all our institutions that will fix all of the problems, and that's not that far off from like Bentham. When you look at it from a certain way. Whereas I'm like way more anti-rationalist, and I think most of the successful institutions we have um, survive not by intelligent design, but by a kind of filtering over generations, where the successful ones get passed on and we imitate them, not rationally, but like there's a monkey see, monkey do element. So that's I think the most uncool view that I have.
I mean, I think that view is really cool. We should
Oh,
try to make that view look good.
we got to bring it back.
Makes
It's gonna be like record store day. Yeah.
a lot of sense. I mean, I guess another heterodox kind of stance I have is I believe in evolutionary theory, and but lots of people do, and it's a little bit silly to say that like those views will get you canceled, right? It's like you just have to communicate with emanating science to the public, and I think people interpret that as cancellation when, it may not be. I also think the left has gotten pretty derailed into identity, politics and sort of lost sight. I mean, this is like the least spicy take ever, but like lost sight of economic, inequality, right, as like a motivating force. Like if we fight for the little guy, we do so in, redistrib re it's like really hard to say ways. Like, to me, that's something a government can do. I think, like, policing identity is a less useful thing for a government to do. So, I don't know if that's a heterodox stance.
Yeah, this was the most controversial thing that I posted the Substack. I had this piece that I've been tinkering with for like a year on colorblindness. And I both about the costs and the benefits. Um, but I really do think that how to put this, it was very hard to give negative feedback to uh real quickly in response to Meg, I think if you start calling something cool, it's almost immediately self-defeating. So I will flag that. Um, so with identity politics stuff, like I, I I think like you're so right that a lot of economic issues we've lost sight of, and I also think that we've lost sight of like conserving wins.
Mm.
So who's fired up about like progressive taxation, even among like the groups, like not just like the median voter, but just highly informed partisans. Like I
Yeah.
just don't think that a lot of the big orgs are interested in that, even though I think the legacy of the estate tax and the progressive income tax are like vastly more consequential for people's bottom line. And part of this, I think, is just because a lot of politics has become more expressive and status based.
Right. Absolutely. And focused on, like you said, the groups, like the camp.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like wealth inequality is one of our biggest problems, and we're sort of living in a time of unparalleled corruption, grift, and self-deceit. And reading about, the few dozen or few hundred or maybe few thousand trans women in sports. Um,
Yeah. And I'm kind of one way I'm a bit of an outlier in my own field of like moral philosophy is I'm kind of sympathetic to the view that the numbers don't count. So in some ways, that makes me like, I'm sort of, I should be thinking ethically that like even a very small minority being having their rights violated is like a huge serious problem. And I think I do believe that on a moral level, but I think on the trans issue, even there's a sort of also missing the forest for the trees of like, um, if public sentiment turns against the cause, like there are tons of gains that could be wiped out. Like Bostock, the Supreme Court case, where like Neil Gorsuch is on the side of extending sex discrimination protection to trans people. Like there are just like recently won gains that could be uh, destroyed. And the kind of like the idea of playing defense, I think, has been lost to a lot of groups.
yeah,
Groups that I mean like identity groups, but I mean like organizations.
yeah, absolutely. I think about that a lot. Like, first of all, how do you operationalize like what you want the government to do on trans issues? Like, do you actually want people to follow others into bathrooms to like double check if like they're just a masculine woman? Really, like, does that actually seem like good use of police resources or really like anybody's time? So I think that's part of it. But I also think what you were saying about like the gains being wiped out, I've now completely lost the thread on.
Oh, it's all good. Sorry. I think that what I was going to say there is like, even if you don't want to dismiss trans issues on the grounds that there's like a small number of people involved,
Yeah.
I think there's still a critique of focusing so much on sports,
Right.
like dying on that hill,
Yeah.
which is that they're you know people that care about equality for minority groups. Like there's a lot of stuff you could lose if you do die on the hill. Like
Right.
things could get rolled way further back than sports
Right.
teams.
Yeah, there's like a slippery slope aspect. I feel like anytime you're trying to restrict somebody's rights. And I've been frustrated with the left that like they've allowed the right to just kind of like own the sort of like way that certain like words are even used. I'm gonna go maybe find a place to plug in my phone because
Oh
this
yeah,
is
sure, sure.
let's see.
Mine is like I'm having to hold it so that it stays alive, but
Yeah, me
that's all I
too.
charge it.
Sorry. I have to go find my charger. Um, but like for example, all this sort of like defunding universities on the basis of DEI, um, like no one's even bothering to defend why we might have DEI. Like it actually is about, I think, making institutions more competitive and like making science better and more representative. And like that's good. Like we should be able to talk about what's good about the sort of unpopular ideas that we're currently like getting attacked for. So
Okay, I think we're getting into something like where there's some interesting friction. So
Yeah.
I think I'm in principle open to um, color cited
Yeah.
and sex cited, like or gender cited, admissions and hiring.
Yeah.
Like, I think it depends a little bit on the political culture whether it's a good idea. So, like in Singapore, to use Joe Heath's favorite example, they have a lot of color cited policies to try to enforce integration. So, um, just even like running for the president, like there's a quota for there's a rotation system based on your ethnicity. And for neighborhoods, there's quotas for living in the neighborhood, for living on the block. Uh, if you're a Malay, you can only sell your house to another Malay sometimes, which can suck because all the buyers might be Chinese.
Huh.
So, but like I don't look at Singapore and think someone needs to go in there and stop them. Like I think they found something that makes sense to them.
Mm,
And but so what makes sense to us?
mm.
That which is not this is not like me from the God's eye moral view, but just what makes sense given the kind of moral traditions that we've got to work with.
Right.
I do think that it's a tough sell to have kind of open ended, general thumb on the scales for one identity group over another.
Yep.
But
Yep. Agree.
but I also think that like really vigorous anti discrimination and like how to put this. So imagine that a group of Black alumni wants to set up a scholarship for first generation Black students or something.
Yeah.
I don't. I I I can imagine being like a real God's eye view, got to be colorblind type of person,
Yeah.
and getting upset about that. I find it hard to get really upset about that because I find it hard to tell people like you're not allowed to care about this identity.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way about, universities shutting down their Black Students Organization or their Latino, like Women in Law or whatever. Like, if people find groups helpful that, like give them a sense of support and community, that doesn't seem like a bad thing to me.
Hmm.
And I think it's unfortunate that it's become so very politicized. And I also just think like the history of sort of like structural discrimination in this country, like to me, it's like, we had centuries of affirmative action for the white male academic or like the white male,
Yeah.
lawyer or the
And
white
and
male
the
whatever.
Gentile.
Yeah, exactly. Like it wasn't even until I think the 50s or early 60s, like Kingman Brewster at Yale, and there were a few other people who, decided to diversify admissions at Ivy Leagues. And there was huge pushback, right? There were like Jewish quotas. There were limits on how many Asian students you could admit. Women weren't even admitted to universities like Yale and Harvard until the 70s. So it hasn't been very long. And so I think the sort of like, oh, the whole thing is set up to favor only women and minorities. It's like you sort of have to take a little more of a aerial view of the situation, I feel like. Um and sort of look at the trajectory of like where we're coming from. And I personally feel like 30 or 40 years of pretty weak and performative diversity signaling doesn't necessarily overturn like institutions that, have been completely non-diverse for hundreds of years.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I think that some of the conservative Supreme Court decisions actually don't depart as much as one might think from that view. Right? Like the idea that you might need some not like explicit quotas, but some kind of pro diversity affirmative action for a while
Right.
is something that even like Sandra Day O'Connor and others have,
Yeah.
would say. Um, I mean, I suppose something that I worry about is just the not even so much the principle, but the practice. So
Yeah.
Jack Miller said, "What if we just did socioeconomic status instead?" I'm glad he asked it in the form of a question because if he had said it, it would have settled the issue immediately, given what we've already established about Jack Miller. But yeah, so I think like if we did socioeconomic status only,
Yeah.
people would be disappointed, and I think we're kind of starting to see it. It's not going to do as much for race as one might think, according to like projections from Raj Chetty. Um, but I mean, I think there's a reasonable case for it on like merit grounds. Like you might say, just you're making up for someone's starting position, and then but using race as a proxy for that, I think is a little bit tricky because then here we get to the in practice thing. I think in practice, a lot of the beneficiaries of DEI, um, uh, affirmative action at universities, at least, were like relatively wealthy immigrants rather than poor African
Right.
Americans.
Yep. Yep.
And that's, I mean, to put it another way, some of this is just an instance of the iron law
Yeah.
of aid, which is the people that need your help most are the ones that are least able to get it.
Totally. Yeah, and I mean, I think the answer then is you build better pipeline programs and more scaffolding. I don't think it's that you, like, totally abandon, um,
Yes, yes,
the
totally.
goal. Like, I also think, like, there's a competitive advantage to universities that include people from different kinds of places, you know? Like, I'm pretty sure part of how I got into college was being from, like, a really small town in Ohio and, um, people from prep schools in, New York City had a harder time getting admitted. So, like, we want to go somewhere where we're gonna meet people from different walks of life and learn something from them, right? Like, that's a utopian ideal of the university is you're, gathering people and, allowing them to sort of benefit from each other's lived experience and form community. And, I think like, when people tour a college, they don't necessarily wanna see that it's only made up of people from one specific demographic.
Yeah,
Like, I actually think it's sort
totally.
of, like, better marketing, and if universities want to have somewhat representative student bodies, I don't actually think that's a bad thing.
Right. But then this is I think the tricky thing, right? Because what if you've got a majority black um, intake one year,
Yeah,
right? Because then if the goal is really like diversity, then you have to. This is like an old point from Judy Thompson in her paper on preferential hiring, but you know that it doesn't always cut in favor of the minority group. You
right.
might say like,
Yep,
well, in order to preserve diversity, we need quick someone find the white guy, right? And I think a lot of people feel uneasy about that. I think in part because they really think of affirmative action as a backwards looking kind of reparation or compensation.
yeah,
Um, and that is something it's only constitutional in very limited ways. But
yeah,
it's so weird how like a bunch of contingent Supreme Court decisions have really shaped our like political culture around this issue. But
totally.
I think you're right though that like in practice, I think a lot of people do see the value of certain types of diversity. Like just one obvious example. If you're in a psychology department and you're hiring, I assume that like if you've got all clinical people, you might try to get someone who does quant,
Totally. Yeah,
right? And the
yeah,
same in philosophy. But it's like if you think of jobs as like these like goodies that must be distributed according to like some fair merit-based procedure, then I can see how like someone that's a clinical psychologist that's better than that quant applicant might feel wronged.
right.
But I
Yeah,
mean, but it's like, well, look, it's not just a goodie to be distributed for the applicants. It's also like an institution's trying to function. So,
yeah,
I think there's like
yeah.
these competing claims we haven't really ironed out in our minds.
Totally, and I think it's even more granular than that. Like, in my, area of the department, we might say, like, "Oh, we just hired an addiction person. Now we need a schizophrenia person, or now we need an anxiety person or a depression person." I
Is
know
that
it's
really
just
how the psychologists individuate? I didn't know that.
yeah. Yes, exactly, like, everybody's got their kind of thing that they do, like, you always worry about the suicidality person, but yeah, like, everybody sort of has their focus, and you wanna have a diverse you want your child family people, you want your, clinical aging people, and so you're weighing a lot of different factors, and I think you're right that it isn't just like an academic job as a goodie, that we disperse through some like perfect formula. It's like it's a model with a lot of different variables that you're looking at. And I also like I use this example in our university is too woke in my essay, but
Mm.
like we're in a part of LA that is majority Latino and we operate a training clinic that serves the community. And so it's actually advantageous for us to have faculty and students who have an understanding of Latino mental health. Um, and and whether that's through their sort of academic studies or in some cases people's lived experience, like I think that's a really good reason to want to hire somebody, right? Is because that's going to be really beneficial for our program. Um, but like, does that mean we have to be canceled for wokeness? Like, I just think like some of these debates end up getting quite ridiculous.
Yeah. Excuse me, Mr. Vance. I've, you know,
Mm.
so this has been super fun. We're coming up to the 90-minute mark. So I thought maybe I would ask you one more question or so. And I'm
Okay.
happy to stick around a little bit. If you want to ask one more question, that's good too. But we'll see how this goes. So what, um, what person are you in the field? And do you, do you like being that person? Do you see yourself as changing, right? So you mentioned there's anxiety people, there's this people.
Yeah.
So what would you say you are?
Oh, yeah. I was gonna say I'm a nice person, but I see what you mean. I'm sort of like a close relationships person, transition to parenthood person. So I'm kind of in the child family world, but I'm actually really interested in parents who are adults, right?
Yeah.
Like how the brain and body changes when you become a parent. And I specifically look at fatherhood. So, but I'm also like, I feel like my identity is changing now as I'm doing more writing, like including book writing, but also Substack writing. And, I've gotten a little burned down on a lot of the sort of traditional levers of academic success. So I don't know if that's a person I either,
Well, that makes
but
sense. Okay,
yeah. And
actually,
you're,
I said one question, but I really want to follow up with something I meant to ask at the beginning. Do you
yeah.
mind?
No,
So
please.
I am hopefully going to be a father in the future.
Oh, congrats.
Yes, thanks. My wife and I are doing IVF, and you know, um, turns out we're both CF carriers, which
Oh,
so it's great not
yeah.
to have it, but
Yep.
I had to think through some of this sort of like population ethics
Yeah.
paradoxes when I saw the sticker shock from IVF.
Yep.
But anyway, I wanted to ask you, do you have any advice, either from your experience or just from like your research, things that might be good to know for someone becoming a parent?
Okay, I literally have a over 200-page book that you can read.
I would
It's
love to
called
read.
Dad Brain: The New Science of Fatherhood, and it's all about how fatherhood transforms the brain and body. So, how's that for a plug?
That's
Um,
it couldn't be better.
but I think yeah, like this would obviously be a longer conversation, but I'm excited for you, and I would say just to embrace it and also to lower your expectations for how easy it's going to be. Oh, there now
Oh,
you can see my dog.
that is precious.
He's probably gonna do some embarrassing itching or something, so maybe I won't keep the camera on him. Um, and then I guess I should ask you, like, what kind of person are you?
Like it's a bit in flux. Um, I was really interested in a field called meta ethics, asking about, what's the status of ethical truths, if there are any truths. And I got just so burned out on that as a student from reading Derek Parfit's On What Matters. Then I switched to kind of normative ethics, so asking questions about, do the ends justify the means? What are our basic moral rights? Where do they come from? And I'm super into normative. I'm a big believer, but I can feel the change happening as I'm switching from kind of thinking about morality as in terms of like how to make sense of our jumbled moral views, how to systematize that. That's I think the kind of the project of normative ethics. I'm switching more to a how does morality fit into an overall successful human society?
Oh, I like that. That seems important. Yeah. I'm sure you know this, there's a whole field of moral psychology too.
Yes, I am not as well read in that as I'd like to be, but I
Yeah.
TA'd a class on like philosophy and psychology in graduate
Yeah.
school,
Yeah.
and I loved those readings, and I was so impressed by the. I mean, I actually did feel like there was way less interaction even people working on that. I felt like there was some talking past each other going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, but, yeah, like, some of my favorite psychologists are moral psychologists, and I don't just mean personally moral, but they study
Mm,
morality.
right.
And, and a lot of it is about sort of, like, understanding, where people's convictions come from and, sort of, like, foundations of, like, what are the values that motivate moral stances, like, you know, are you more interested in, I don't know, freedom and rights, or are you more interested in protection and, maybe sympathy for more authoritarian styles of leadership? So I don't know. It sounds a little bit analogous to what happens in philosophy, maybe.
No, definitely. And I mean, I think, a few names of people that I know are like people definitely in philosophy read Jonathan Haidt's
Oh, yeah.
work. And I don't know if there's anybody else that you had in mind that you might
Yeah. You should
recommend.
read my buddies, Jesse Graham and Morteza Degani.
Jesse
They
Graham and
do.
Tim Degani.
And, Morteza does really cool work using large language models to, like he can, like, scrape all of Twitter and figure out, like, when, a hate crime is likely to be committed, for example, by looking at people's moral language. So
Wow.
really interesting work, like, using large, like, data corpi. Um, but, I remember, Jesse Graham told me that, being conservative is linked with, like, a high disgust threshold.
Mm.
And if you're sort of, like, liberal, you're less disgusted by things, and Jesse was like, "I mean, if I see, like, a plate at a restaurant and someone leaves the table, I'll just eat the food." And I was like, "You know what? I would kinda do that too." Like, if someone has a really delicious piece of cake or something, and they don't eat it, and it's just right there in front of me, like, I would probably eat it. So I always think about that as my political benchmark.
I feel like if I answer the question, I'm gonna out myself as I'm gonna ruin my impeccable nonpartisan image.
Wait, so
Just
if there was really good chocolate cake and you're at a cafe and the person at the table next to you left it there and you're really hungry and you love chocolate cake, and no one's looking, like, would you eat a bite of it?
I'm sorry, we're out of time today, but no. Wait, there is one third final question for you from the chat from Newton. It says, speaking of LLMs, quick question. Um, I mentioned Sift Toolbox to Darby on her AI article. Wow.
Yes, that was so helpful.
Yeah, I was thinking about building an AI tool that does the research, that reads the actual journal articles and makes sure that any quotes are, I think it was going to be accurate.
Yep.
Um, is that, I suppose, I think the question might be like, is that something that would
Yeah.
be useful?
Yeah, I think that would be really useful. I think I wrote about this, like, discovering, this kind of weird, slop version of my research, like, through AI, like, that a study I had done had been sort of chopped up and served back by AI in this totally garbled way. And so there is a need for AI tools, I think, that are more accurate and that are actually reading primary sources. I'm such a Luddite that I would say I still think students should, like, do the actual work of reading the source. I think relying on, any kinda AI to do a research review um, is sort of just generally bad practice, but I think in terms of, like, informing the public, like, 100% we need better AIs.
I feel like, it as painful as it is to
Oh, you
stop
want
just
our
as the
assistance with the prompts.
Oh, I see,
Yeah,
sorry.
how do we help with the prompts?
Huh.
Oh, that's a good question.
I don't know. I feel like I'm not a prompt engineer.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know that I'm actually that good with prompts.
huh.
I
But
feel like I would just be like, "Could you actually just read the paper and tell me what it says?" I
yeah.
don't know, that might not be a good prompt.
Well, I mean, one thing you could do is if you have something like that, that you wanna get something kind of amazing about Substack is the ability to crowdsource from,
Yep,
like, interesting people. So, if you send something to one of us that we could restack, I mean, I think that might be one option.
yep.
Um, yeah, I mean, go out, make a post out of it, Newton. I mean,
Yeah, I
just it
was
goes
gonna
back to what we
say,
were saying
write an
earlier.
essay and tag us.
Yeah, you'll get over your anxiety about posting if you assuming that you have any. I see, like, instructions, how you tell your students to evaluate a paper. Um,
No, I don't know that I would tell a student. Well, okay, I would probably Yeah, okay, that's I see what you mean. So, like, you're saying if you feed it a research paper, how would you try to figure out what it's really saying? Um, alright, I don't know. I have to think
Yeah,
more about it offline.
same. Uh, Darby, it was so nice to quasi meet you. A big fan of the Substack, and please don't be a stranger in the future.
Totally. I'm so happy that you had the idea to do this, and I'm also a fan of your Substack. Hopefully, we can do these conversations again.
Love it.
Yeah, let's do a
Goodbye.
recurring feature.
Definitely. And please pet the dog for me.
Oh, yeah, he's
Thanks,
being weird.
everybody.
All right, bye.
Thanks, everyone.